what we're trying to do today is get some folks, get some experts from outside of Mountain Travel to come in and talk about tools and digital marketing. Part one of our session was a roundtable discussion moderated by Erik, handsome guy on the left in the purple shirt. And we had a great discussion about trends and tools and just what's going on in digital marketing today. What we wanted to do now with part two, there's so much good stuff covered, and obviously a lot of people had a lot of great questions. Open this up, have it be a conversation between you guys in the audience and our panelists here. So we really hope that you can ask specific tactical questions, anything specific to your resort, specific to your tour operator business, specific to your lodging property, anything at all involving digital marketing. It's fair game for these guys here. So I don't know if anyone wants to be bold, be the first one to jump in here. I'm happy to kick it off as well. But we really hope that, that you guys enjoy this piece of it and are able to go home with some actionable tools and strategies that you can put in place and help us all grow this business together. So, all right, to keep things from being awkward, I'll kick it off. I'd like to kick this off.
It would be great to hear from the person with goggles.
I was just going to say that. Respect for walking in with goggles and a hat on.
Never seen that before. It's a first time.
It is a ski conference. You know. It is a ski conference at Squaw. Actually, hold on. Since there were so many people who are new to this session, can we just do a quick reintroduction of our panelists, who you are, what your background is? Erik,
sure. My name's Erik Blachford, and I'm a former CEO and CMO at Expedia, and also have worked in environmental services, ran a tour operator that's a high-end bike tour company called Butterfield and Robinson, so no active travel a little bit. And right now I'm kind of a part-time venture capitalist.
I'm Gregg Brockway. I've been in the travel industry for the last 10 years or so. I was a co-founder of Hotwire and more recently a co-founder of TripIt.
Dustin Robertson, I'm the CMO of Backcountry. I've been doing e-commerce since 2000 and pretty much all at Backcountry, so kind of brought the ski industry, at least from a retail perspective, onto the internet.
Wait, don't you have to mention your ski cred? It's
yeah, I think we need to incorporate that.
Sorry, I didn't mention. Oh, I don't have any ski cred.
Erik,
I didn't even say before. I learned to ski at Montavia, north of Montreal. How many people here have skied there? I'll be so impressed. Come on, nice. Nice. It's as tall as this room.
I actually grew up skiing here at Squaw Valley, and I spent a few years. I was a Mighty Mite for many years, and I spent a few years on the national ski team before moving on into the technology world.
Gregg, true or false? Your mother was a member of the 1960 U.S. ski team.
Can I tell you how happy she's going to be that I get to call her tonight and tell her how many times the fact that she was in the 1960 Olympics came up? Thanks.
Ski cred, dude.
I've been skiing my entire life, and my entire life's designed around it, including my job, like my college choice, and my location, my kids. My child's currently following Ted Liggety's progress through the Park City Farm Team ski race program.
All right, I think you might win. I don't know. My name's Chris Sacca. I am a Truckee local, and I run I was an executive at Google for a number of years, and then I moved up here and started a venture capital firm called Lowercase Capital. We manage $2.25 billion across startups as well as I buy late stage entities. So investor in companies like Twitter and Instagram, and as well as do a lot of work in Hollywood. I like to ski, but I'm not a very good skier, particularly compared to the folks I have up here. But I think the last section there was actually some really good debate, so I'm looking forward to seeing conflicting answers. I do a lot of panel discussions, and they're usually really sleepy and lame. And the four of us haven't fully agreed on anything yet, so I'm pretty fired up about what's coming.
Great, thanks guys. I do like the idea of kicking off to Anne in the back.
A question?
Yeah, please.
All right, with all the different social media channels that we have, how do you determine what is the best one? And my sub-question is, how do you determine how do you monitor that? How do you determine how effective those are? There you go. I thought of that on the chair.
Yeah. So I'll jump in maybe with the second part of your question, the monitoring part, because I really think it starts there. I mean, it's the first piece is just understanding what people are saying about your resort or your property online. And as I mentioned in the previous session, there are a number of great tools out there for it. I'm involved with a company called Review Pro, but there's several others, Revenate, Review Analyst. And for me, it's a service that every resort, every hotel on the planet ought to have, because the amount of time that goes into individually managing, monitoring each of these different channels individually is completely overwhelming. So have a service that goes out, scours all of these services for you, can even look at your competitors, can do semantic analysis, can basically look at the meaning. Was that a positive tweet, a negative tweet? What were they tweeting about? Aggregating it up, distilling it down, presenting it to you in a dashboard format so that you can very quickly and efficiently see what's going on around your property or resort. I mean, it's totally the baseline of then being able to effectively participate in the broader social web. So I'm a huge fan of these businesses, and I think everyone. Is anybody using a service like that today?
What are some specific ones that maybe they can go home and research and look into?
Well, again, full disclosure, I'm involved in Review Pro, but there are several others that are out there. Revenate is another big name from a San Francisco company.
So I would just answer the question about which social media channels to use. If I put my hat on as a guy who is a partner in an active travel company, and we got about 40 employees, and the marketing department is about 4 people. I'm guessing that's not too far off some of the marketing departments you guys are familiar with. I would say the best social media channel is the one that you can actually pull something off in and do them one at a time. Really think through very carefully, spend a bunch of time on research, and then figure out the one where you actually have the internal chops to put out the content that's going to make it sing properly. And if you try to do them all at the same time and you have a reasonably limited bandwidth, what's going to happen is you're going to have a very hard time measuring which of the channels is delivering anything for you. Plus, you're going to be looking for different things from the different channels. Plus, you're probably not going to be satisfied with what you're doing in any of the channels anyway. So I would say the one that you can pull off, and obviously probably don't pick a little niche-y one to start off with, but that's sort of obvious, I guess.
I think where I would dovetail from both of you guys there is to bifurcate it into you have a responsibility to listen everywhere everyone's talking or engaging about you across any platform at all. And so on the listening side and the consumption side, you can't afford to not be where all of your users, customers, visitors are talking about you. And then on the outbound side, I do think you have to bring your A game. I do think you maybe have to pick and choose. I think you have to be careful to try and deny that any one of these is an island, right? I mean, Instagram doesn't exist on its own. It pushes out to Twitter and Facebook, and it's a big component of those platforms. And YouTube doesn't exist on its own. Most YouTube videos get discussed over on Tumblr, and so it's hard to really pick and choose and isolate on any one of these because of the interrelatedness. But I absolutely think the number one most important thing is to realize it has to be an authentic voice for that community. It has to be done by a human, signed by a human, put an actual human name on it, and you can't just repurpose the bullshit you put out through your traditional PR channels and think that it's somehow going to play in social media. It'll actually cost you to do that. But I think done right, done authentically, you just don't overthink it, and it doesn't actually require as much effort as a lot of you make it out to be sometimes. I mean, tweets don't have to go out by committee. They don't have to be reviewed and scheduled ahead of time, et cetera. You can put real, live, human content up in these things, and I think you'll see some ROI there.
Let's answer your question directly. We have had success with Facebook and Twitter. That's where our customers appear to be. And I agree, you need to be authentic and listen everywhere. And we use a listening service. But yeah, Facebook and Twitter are really the only place that has any scale where you can actually amass a large group of people and really have them interact with your brand.
Well, while we're on the topic of social media then, so the general consensus is that you can't half-ass it. You have to whole-ass whatever social media channel you're going to do. And with all of these different...
That's a two-cheek strategy?
Yes.
Yeah,
And so with how quickly social networks are popping up and getting taken back down, how do you figure out when it's time to sort of plant your stake in a new up-and-coming social network, so like Google Plus, for example, or, yeah, no, exactly, I mean, your face just said it, but is it you find where the customers are already talking about you and then go in and try and create a beachhead there, or do you create it and then hope that they come to you?
I think it's the user's pull. I don't think you can, I mean, one of the things that I think folks in this room have struggled with just as a user within this industry is everyone tries to create their own new social network with their own new login and their own new identity, and it's yet another, and there's just fatigue from that, right? Is that every individual community now, your users, particularly your casual users, only have so much bandwidth to invest in that kind of stuff. And so I think you look for where people are hanging out, where they're engaging with your brand, and you go there and you participate alongside them. And I think what's great is that tools like Facebook and Twitter are now, they have this other tier of user, like the professional, the corporate user, where they give you a little bit more control over how you engage, a little bit more control over your identity and your page, so that you can have a home base within those platforms. But I think too often I see people try and reinvent the wheel. And this is what happens. Like, you've all been in these meetings where someone's like, we got to have a social strategy. We got to have an app. Well, let's have a social app. Let's build our own. Who knows a guy who can build this? Let's put it on an RFP. Let's get it built for $500,000. And like, no, I don't like the way the logo works on that, et cetera. And so, well, we want all the data about these people, so they better log in with, like, let's have them give us their whole bio and log in on this thing, and then we'll make them download this app. And then 6 months later, the nephew of the owner who led this project comes in and is like, actually, we have 14 users, and we've never sold anything through it, and nobody gives a shit, and they don't tweet out from it. And that's, you've all been in that exact meeting before. And so I think follow your users to the place where they're already hanging out and talking about you, and engage them there.
I mean, you fish where the fish are, right? I mean, right now, it's so at TripIt, we actually had a fair amount of resources to devote against this, but really for us, there were only 3 places that mattered. It was Twitter, it was Facebook, and because TripIt had a large business audience, it was LinkedIn. And if you got to decide where to spend your scarce resources, I would have a hard time recommending anybody go much beyond that with the bulk of their. There are great new things to try out. You know, we talked about Pinterest earlier, which is exciting, interesting, totally new. Who knows? But right now, the scale is just so much different at a Facebook or a Twitter. It's really hard to see spending much resource beyond those two.
So you talked about deals in the first section and how Groupon in particular hoped it would be very social tool, and it just wasn't. So why? Is there a reason for that? They just not do it correctly?
They just stopped doing it. So they stopped selling it as a group thing, right? I mean, the original plan, the original Groupons, if you're around, were like, get a bunch of your friends to buy this thing, and then you all get the deal, right? And so it was a way to kind of, there was social compulsion to actually redeem a deal. They just moved away from that completely, and you got dinner, and you got a spa treatment, and you got your nails done, and that led to a lot of breakage, and it led to a lot of fatigue, and I think everyone loaded up. They did their 6 Groupons, and they're like, screw this, I'm not going to do it again. But I think there's a real social component. I mean, people tend not, other than on powder days, people tend not to ski alone. They tend not to drive up here from the city alone. And I think as you think about deals, you know, there's a group component. I mean, people who go in groups tend to show up, by the way. Like, it's hard to get the momentum of a group to not drive up and to not show up at the mountain when, you know, safety in numbers kind of thing. And so I was just, as we talked about that particular component of the deal, I think they forgot what was the group part of it, and instead it was just on.
Yeah, you know, a lot of deals come in lots of different flavors, right? And the kind of classic friend get a friend type thing, you know, open a checking account and you get a toaster, or get your friend to open a checking account and you get 2 toasters. There are some folks doing that really well online through social channels. I mean, Bonobos, they make men's pants. They've just got this standard thing that they just bang out over and over again. Basically, you buy a pair of pants, you get that $50 credit that you can give to a friend. And if your friend uses it, then you get another $50 credit, right? So, super simple thing, right? But actually, when you think about it, it does all the stuff that you want it to do, right? Because it's getting you to spread the message for the brand in a way where you are actually giving your friend something of value, which is really good, right? You don't want to be in a situation where you send an email and say, go buy these pants. And, you know, by the way, there's something in it for me, but I'm not actually going to tell you that. And you feel, I don't know, you feel a little weird when it's stuff like that. And, you know, I sort of agree, a lot of this promotional stuff, there is something inherently cooperative in it. You know, I don't know if that's the same as social or not, but it does strike me that now that everybody's connected up, you're going to see way more of that kind of thing, particularly around activities that involve a group. And I'm not suggesting that wearing pants is, you know, necessarily a group activity, but
I don't know. Everyone here seems to be wearing pants. Oh, I can't see the back row. She said no.
Well, it seems to me, just listening to this, that one of the easier or more relevant applications for resort operators might be on the season pass side. Do you just, of any of the resort operators in here, has anyone sort of dabbled with anything like that, like or for a friend program or a group purchase program or anything like that? Yeah. Have you guys had any success with that?
We did our season passes. If you bought a season pass, then you could offer the discount to your friends. I think it was up to 6 friends that you could, friends or family, you could offer them passes at a discounted rate, but you had to purchase them at the time that you purchased your season pass.
Were you able to track through what percentage of those shares were to incremental first-time pass holders?
I'm sure they were. I wasn't involved in tracking stuff.
Cool.
What's your opinion on QR code?
No, I think they're both dead on arrival. I think they require a lot of work, and anytime you have to integrate one more layer, which is the hardware layer, into the stack, it's just that much harder. I think QR codes are like aesthetically they kill your vibe, and I think NFC is the carriers trying desperately to hold on to a closed platform that I think is going to happen at the authentication layer. I think the credit card companies win, and those credit cards get associated with an identity layer, Facebook, Twitter, Google, and then that gets integrated into the back end, either on commerce, people are just going to authenticate with their handle and buy, or into the physical point of presence, I don't think it's NFC. I think hard case is actually really close to might happen, or they might still be a physical token, but I don't see NFC really being pervasive across merchants everywhere.
And for people who don't know what NFC is, it's...
NFC is you have a chip in your phone that when you hold it really close to the register, it dings you. I mean, frankly, Bump has even gotten in this business. You know the Bump app? You can bump money now. I don't see NFC necessarily doing it. By the way, reasonable people disagree with me on that.
So marketers love QR codes because you can track things with them. And yeah, they're totally useless, except at Bonnaroo, where they tell you where the bathrooms are and what bands are playing on what stages at what times. That was like one really good use of a QR code.
So I'm down on QR codes too for exactly the same reasons. I'm less down on NFC. It may not be that specific technology that allows me to use my phone as a payment device, but I think the ability to have, and NFC is actually a couple different things. It gets, I don't want to get too technical, but the ability to use a technology like NFC to make my phone a portable payment device and have offers dynamically customized based on my specific identity, I think is something that will happen at some point and is very exciting for the whole travel industry.
So I completely agree with that. I just think NFC is a wireless standard, and I think why reinvent the wheel where our phones know where they are already. They know where they are in relation to other phones. They know where they are by Bluetooth, by Wi-Fi, by GPS, and by cell tower association. And there's 7 radios in your iPhone. Like, that phone knows where it is. We don't need to add another one. And so I think with a human authentication layer on top of that, like, I think actually your phone is more secure than your credit card and has a lot more data and can be a lot more enriched. I just don't think it happens by the NFC standard that Google and Sprint are trying to force on us all.
So I'm going to take the opposite view. Well, not the opposite view, but I actually... I spent so much time trying to figure out how people could respond to some of the stuff that we used to do in print and outdoor. I think that, listen, do I love the aesthetic of a QR code? Not really. I don't like what a barcode looks like either particularly. But if you think about the real stumbling block to that working properly, it's really that the scanning is really a pain in the ass, right? I mean, if all you had to do was take a picture of your QR code and then you got what you wanted out of it, it's a lot easier than writing down a URL or writing down a phone number or remembering the thing you saw. So I'm not sure that's exactly the form factor, but people do have a need to walk around in the world and maintain a little bit of reminder information about what they see out there. And I don't know, I've seen one really cool, what I thought was a really cool QR code application. And maybe I'm just biased by having seen this thing, but Heineken did this promotion. You can look it up at the web. It was at a music festival in Europe somewhere. And you go into the little, I don't know, tent, and you put a message in that's your message that you want to say to other people at the festival. They print out a QR code sticker, and you stick that on yourself somewhere, and then it's just readable with a standard QR code reader. And so people all over the thing are reading it, and they're getting the message, and it's an icebreaker, right? That's fun. That's a fun thing, because you're like, oh, you really do believe in whatever it is you just said you believed in. And, you know, so the Heineken brand falls away from it completely, and it's just a person-to-person thing. But I guess I sort of saw that, and I sort of thought, well, are there other ways you could do that? Well, yeah, but, you know, right now that's pretty easy to do, and NFC would be impossible to do in that scenario. So I don't know. Everything's got its place. It's a hell of a lot easier than, you know, writing things down. And there was a little bit of a mysterious thing there. I bet the code gets cracked. Ha ha ha.
Well, so I mean, NFC would actually be perfect there, and it's happening through Bluetooth right now with Apple like Radar and stuff like that, where it's just telling me like, hey, these are other people that are around me right now, and yet it's got a profile attached to it, or it takes from a Twitter or Facebook identity and allows you to do that without the literally kind of Paleolithic act of taking a picture of a little black and white design. And I think what we're seeing is our phones right now, all your phones know exactly where you are right now, and they know who else you're around. They're scanning right now. They can see every little Bluetooth channel that's open, and they can see what Wi-Fi node they're attached to and what tower they're attached to. They know exactly what's happening here. You've one by one authorized individual apps to pull from that. But if you use Path, like Path knows when you leave this town and you go to the next town and go to the next town, and it announces it to all your friends. If you use Radar, it can tell you which room you're in this conference. And so we don't have to build another NFC layer or another QR code layer in order to enable these things. Instead, they can happen very passively and richly and attached to an authenticated identity layer, and I think that's what's going to actually draw a lot of the value out of this stuff. So instead of saying, hey, everyone, stop at this billboard, pull out your friggin' phone, focus it on that thing, take a picture, you have to have the QR code app reader, have that go ahead and load a URL, et cetera. Instead, you know, you're attaching that data. So during the Wanderlust Festival here at Summer, the yoga festival, people are taking pictures with Instagram. Instagram is tagging them with a location, as well as any hashtags that are going in there. Those are getting aggregated into a genuine experience here. And Squaw was able to look at that, the Wanderlust people were able to look at that and be like, wow, these are all the people who attended. We have the rich media that derive from their experience, and we can actually push back out through either Foursquare or through the Instagram app back to those people. And you gather a much richer data set in a normal human behavior. I think every time we can avoid having to retrain humans to do something new, we all make a lot more money and get a lot more data.
I'd be curious to do a quick sample about this too. So I mean, the fact that we're all at a conference at Squaw on digital marketing, to me, says that we're all our own sort of target customers here. Technologically savvy, probably all have smartphones. How many people here, more than once, have scanned a QR code in a magazine ad that they've seen? That is very surprising. What about on site somewhere, like at a ski area or on a billboard or something like that? Did you guys find that it was an enriching experience on the whole? Raise your hand if you did.
Hold on, were those your own QR codes and you were just testing them?
Some were terrible, and they would do work or they send you just to the home page. I think for QR codes to work, it has to be relevant to what you're looking at and tell a story. Because if you just send someone straight to your home page and it has nothing to do with what you're looking at the moment, it's useless.
Yeah. I'll tell you my favorite one. And of course, these things are super narrow use cases, but you're sitting at a table, you get a bottle of wine, you light the wine, there's a QR code, you scan the QR code, and you get the story of the wine. You get the winemaker talking about it. I can't remember who did, it was an Aussie winemaker, but I thought, that was smart. And I never, ever would have typed in the URL. And I don't think there'd be an NFC communication device sitting on a bottle of wine. It's just the economics don't. I mean, maybe there's RFID or something, but I was like, okay, I can't actually think of any other way that interaction could have happened outside of some sort of a visual code thing.
But that bottle already has a barcode on it, and so you can just pull it off the barcode. It also has a logo on it, and so you use Google Goggles or Amazon, and they actually know what you're looking at too. And so I think rather than going down and investing in another layer, you know, people are going to take pictures at your resort. The phone's going to be aware where it is, and you're going to be able to push content back to them on that basis without having to build a new kind of prehistoric technology layer there. It's regressive. It drives me crazy as a technology developer. Going back.
Along those same lines, what are your thoughts on like
QR codes?
Like 5-star mobile marketing, where somebody can text a 5-digit code to your company name and they opt into some type of a marketing program?
I think Twitter replaced it. I think what was interesting about that was to be able to take a long address of a URL and basically shorten it to a convenient device and a convenient handle. And I think Twitter did a very good job of that now that we have the pervasiveness of Twitter and the handle there. And I think Facebook is starting to get back to that, where instead of, I mean, a lot of your Facebook fan pages have this ridiculously long URL, and they didn't really assign a unique identifier that was mnemonic at all, but they're getting back to that now, and they're getting back to Facebook email and stuff like that. And so I think, I forget if it came up in the first session. No, it was this session, like go where the people are, go where your users are and stuff like that. They're already using these platforms, and so you establish your authenticated identity there, and then you know, so you can push off Twitter if you want to the people who've opted in to get that push, right? You can push off Facebook too. I think giving someone yet another thing to juggle is a lot of work, hard to convert, and then just feel spammy on the back end.
Looking forward, say 5 years or so, anything in the pipeline, anything we should keep our eyes on as far as innovations, digital technology, anything like that coming down the pipeline?
Climate change?
There weren't as many laughs to that one.
No, that's funny. I've been on kind of a roll today.
Yeah, I'm just saying it hurts. It's real.
It's going to be a shorter season.
Oh gosh, I mean that's such a tough one. I mean, I think one thing we haven't talked much about is what's going on in the kind of search marketing world, and you know that space is changing so quickly. You've moved from a time when you could buy banners to now to a point where you could buy audience, to a point now today where you can actually buy individual profiles. You can't buy names yet, but you know, and unlikely to ever buy names, but you can buy individuals who have either been at your site or taken certain actions or belong to certain groups. And I'm really interested to see, and the technology is going to allow you to do more and more and more. The question is, at what point does privacy intercede there and head that off? So I think there's going to be a really interesting thing to follow around. The technology is going to give more and more tools to do more and more precise marketing, and at some point at scale. But there's going to be a lot of privacy implications around that, around you know what happens and how you can use all this data that people are so aggressively collecting.
I think you're entirely right, and
yet that may be a first today.
Yeah. but what's happening is it's only happening on one side of the equation, yeah. And if I mildly offend anybody, but I'm seeing the technology side drive more and more scientific and math-driven results, and on the ad buyer side, a bunch of people who don't understand it aren't doing their own math, aren't bringing their A game to the table to understand how best to use these tools. And it's created this entire agency layer that's getting rich based on, you know, like you talk about like the crisis of math and engineering and science graduates in the United States. We definitely don't have as many of those people going into marketing as should be there. I mean, marketing is math, and there's still soul to it, and there's still personality, and there's still authentic voice. But when you start using technology tools to drive customers, you have to understand math. It has to be an analytically driven business. You have to be able to sit down and wade through the charts and graphs. And particularly in this industry, on an anecdotal basis, I don't meet mathematicians. I don't meet computer scientists. I don't meet people who are analytically driven. It's all gut. It's like, what should our season pass price be? Like $279 feel pretty good? Fuck it, let's do $279. And so, and what do those guys do? Do they do $289? Shit. And yet, I mean, the fact that this industry hasn't done dynamic pricing at scale, it fascinates me to no end. You know, despite the fact I live in this town, I don't go to Squaw anymore. And it's the old Yogi Berra thing, like the place is so crowded nobody goes there anymore. You know, I think this mountain leaves a lot of money on the table by fixing its price sometime in July and September, and then selling the shit out of a bunch of passes that actually get exploited out. You know, if you charge people in this town who live here $600 to ski here, they would still ski here. There isn't another Squaw in this town. But instead, you let them all get a pass for $250, and the mountain is just saturated, and money's left on the table. So I think, like, to your point, the technology tools are getting richer and richer and richer and more refined, and we know more about the people buying our stuff and how they flow through the chain of commerce. But I don't see the people on the other side of the equation knowing how to work with that data, how to collect it, parse it, and use it to make smart decisions to advertise and engage across these platforms.
Yeah, I would just push, in a slightly different direction, which is, 5 years. 5 years in the ski industry, well, 5 seasons is actually not that long a time. Boy, 5 years is a long time in the IT, the sort of tech world, given just the incredible pace that things are moving at. I think if you sort of assumed for a second that everybody is carrying a mobile device, that it's geolocatable, that it's geo-aware, it's getting pretty close to that already. It might sound a little wacky, but at my little bike tour company, we decided not to do this right now, but just for various reasons, but we could easily do it next year. We could easily know where everybody is and just have it on the iPad and see them biking along so we can figure out where to put the van to support them. I mean, it's just sort of dead drop. It's just not that hard to do. I don't think it's inconceivable that you guys will be able to watch where everybody is on the mountain, so there's no ski patrols going back and forth saying what's open, what's not, for basic crowd control. I mean, I would think there'd be financial incentives you could probably get to people in order to get them to ski one part of the mountain in terms of others. Maybe that's not 5 years, maybe it's more. It just strikes me that, I guess I disagree with Chris. I mean, if some of the resorts had some of the same people who are sitting at other companies who just think about these issues all day long. You see that movie Moneyball, right? I mean, it's a bit like, that's what it feels like. It's like somebody's going to be Billy Bean here and bring in a bunch of quant folks, and no one else is going to know what hit them, is what I would think. And I bet you that happens within the next 5 years. I can't quite predict what it's going to look like, but boy, it's going to come down to math.
So it actually happened starting 2 years ago. I have a company called Path Intelligence that does that. It does it mostly indoor. It tracks how cell phones move around a mall. So it can watch all the cell phones in a mall move from store to store. And it used to be back in the day, we took all that data and we just sold it on a monthly basis. Like, here's the heat map of traffic in your mall. But the company got sharp. We started working together and we decided what keeps us from making it real time. And so what we could do is we could watch the traffic pattern in a mall and we could see how many customers went into this store. Let's say it's Victoria's Secret. And we could say, okay, there's 1,000 people a day who go into that store. So then what we would do is once we had the control established, we would put a Victoria's Secret ad on a flat panel in that corner of the mall. And then we could watch how many more incremental people ended up in the Victoria's Secret store as a result of our ad over there. And then we would take it down and we'd see how many were there and then take it. And so we knew exactly how many people we could send there. And so if I had to walk in and try and convince that store owner to buy in-mall advertising on a screen, it would be a hand-wavy bullshit artist sale where like, we've got all this focus group data on how amazing these ads are, and it would be all bullshit, right? But instead, I was able to walk into these guys and just say, look, you get 1,000 customers a day without our ad, you get 1,200 with our ad, fuck, you pay me if you want that ad to keep showing, right? Yeah. And it's like, it's all driven by math, and they're just like, oh, where do I put the money? And so it's a very, very clear transaction. We haven't done it outdoor yet. Maybe one of you guys will have to use Path Intelligence outdoor. But
you could see it. I mean, I just came down from a week at Whistler, and it's amazing. Every now and again, you roll into one of the mid-mountain restaurants, and it's totally packed. And you know the other ones aren't as packed. And all you'd need to do is have some way of using the basic traffic data to be able to send out to everybody else, hey, by the way, food's on sale at the other places. You'd be able to shift it around. I don't think it's complicated conceptual stuff. I just don't know how long it takes to implement.
That technology exists currently. Actually, Whistler uses it in their ski school, I believe, for their kids, and where they monitor all the kids. So come in.
Oh, yeah, the flake thing is
very
cool.
Yeah.
But it's an after the fact.
It's an after, exactly, but to implement that earlier on would be fantastic. Yeah.
Except the flake, it is kind of cool. The flake buzzes on the instructor's leg when one of the kids gets outside a certain radius. Pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great program.
So then if marketing is math, if we're all in agreement, and I am certainly in that camp, that marketing is math, then what is the toolkit that we should be using outside of the social media tracking that we were talking about earlier to quantify return on anything that we're doing digitally? Like, there's a lot of different platforms out there. I was just having this conversation on the tram last night, and it's really interesting to me. at Liftopia, we use Google Analytics because it's free, and it's good. Do you guys think Google Analytics is sort of like the minimum baseline? Do you think that it actually makes sense to pay for an analytics platform above and beyond what you can get for free out there? Are there any up-and-coming ones that you guys have seen that might be worth exploring?
I can just answer this as a massive Omniture customer that we've actually tried to switch to Google Analytics, and we measure everything to the third decimal point, so these guys are absolutely right. It's math, and my search marketing department is just one big math problem all day long. And Google Analytics is super powerful, and if we weren't so embed and had so much code going and had actually built some custom things that Google Analytics couldn't do, we would have switched to the free version, and we're a $300 million online business, so that's a pretty good endorsement for Google Analytics.
But I think there's a hole there, and it's a hole that you can talk to, is that it doesn't take tweet data, it doesn't take Facebook data, it doesn't take Instagram data, it doesn't take blog data, it doesn't integrate the actual flow and inflection across all these platforms back into the commerce.
I mean, Omniture doesn't either. You can make it do that, and those were the things that it didn't do, you're right, and that's why we stuck with Omniture, but you got to work really hard to make Omniture do that stuff.
Yeah, I think it depends on where you're starting from and where you want to get to and how much you have in the way of resources to invest. Google Analytics is infinitely better than not doing anything, right? and I would bet there are probably some people who are still not measuring very well, how they're doing. And Google Analytics is a free tool that you don't pay a penny for it. And it's pretty darn easy to implement on your website. So as a baseline, as a starting point, it's great. And when you outgrow it, that's a high-class problem, because there are lots of other solutions we use several in my last company that are also terrific. But the thing about Google Analytics that it's not just getting people to your site; it's what they do once you get there, and being thoughtful around what you're trying to drive people to do. Is it to engage? Is it to see offers? Is it to purchase? Is it to, do you feel like getting them to look at things besides skiing that you do in your resort is a strategic, like that you can set up goals, and as you start to get more event driven in what you're trying to drive your users to do, that's when Google Analytics starts to break down. It's much harder to get specific using Google Analytics.
I haven't seen a good integration with a VoIP phone system either. Maybe you guys have it.
Like a paper call?
Yeah, just e-commerce vendors who do a significant percentage on the phone and trying to figure out, tracking it all the way down. It's without cycling through a whole lot of phone numbers or kludges like that. It's a difficult problem there too.
Yeah, we just ask for a code on the phone. It's like old school.
Old school, right?
Like we look at the bottom of the web browser and read off the 8-digit code, QR code.
It'll be worth your time. Yeah. read that QR code.
Yeah, it's really valuable to the customer because we just need to know where you came from. Like they don't care.
Yeah, that's a. I think nothing better.
I see the whole world of advertising and commerce is starting at the left side of like the least valuable ads in the world are billboards on the side of the road, where like CBS Outdoor actually pays people to stand at the base of those billboards and watch traffic go by and see how many eyeballs they see looking up at the billboard. Then they put that in a report and they sell it back to you as great traction data on the billboard you bought for them. It's such bullshit. And so then as you go down that continuum, you get to TV, radio, television, and has anyone here ever gotten a Nielsen packet in the mail? Yeah, you have, right? 2 crisp $5 bills, well ironed in a bubble sheet. And you're supposed to remember what you watched for the last week, and that's the basis for all of television advertising. So Arbitron, surveys from people who are dumb enough to answer the phone. So you have, and on print, you have no idea about actual engagement. You just get really bad circ data, and a lot of those publishers are actually buying their own shit just to elevate the prices. So you move down, and finally you get to digital, where you get some CPM, and that's the very first time you get some actual concrete data about exposure, and if you know where it is on the page, above the fold, et cetera, you start to get some data back. Move down, you get into the cost per click, and that was the first point where you could actually say, but for this ad, the user wouldn't have taken this response. You don't necessarily get the data from the advertiser or the analytics platform about what happens after that, but maybe in there somewhere are CPE ads, which are this ethereal cost per engagement thing, and you're not sure. They hovered over something, they saw a little mini video, who knows how to value that per se, but keep going down, you get into the cost per action, pay-per-call type stuff. Again, I've prompted them, but I've prompted them to take a much more high-value action. From there, you get into lead gen. I ask them 5 questions to see if they're a good candidate for a mortgage, and they are, and so I'm handing them to you. As we keep going down, at each point, the advertiser knows more and more about the perceived value, the expected value of that user. And they know more and more about the likelihood of that user to go buy that stuff. And so you keep going down. And now you start to get into the geo stuff. You get into like door swing ads where, and no one's brought up Foursquare today, but it's the kind of thing where it's like, but for my ad or intervention, that person wouldn't have entered your premises. I don't actually know what they did once they were there. Like, I didn't know what the value of a customer going into Victoria's Secret was. They probably do. I don't have that data, but I know it's greater than 0. And so as you move down, then you get into coupons, we get into the redemption. Like, my ad actually triggered a purchase at your place. I don't know what the lifetime value of that is. I don't know what the margin on your product, but that's the Groupon Living social business. I got somebody to show up and buy some stuff. And then the final one is the payment integration, where I'm actually the mechanism by which you buy your stuff. So I'm Square, I'm Amazon, I'm Google Checkout. And so as you go down this continuum, at each point, the value of the ad is higher and the likelihood of conversion is higher. And yet what we found is where I think the riches are for all of us, whether we're making the tools or using the tools, is figuring out as we build the linkage between these things, we can actually inform the true value of the lower, of the kind of more abstract ads. And so right now I have data that can show you the value of your tweet, because I can show you of these many tweets, how many actually ultimately lead to a conversion. And then you can build that right in and work backwards and say, wow, that tweet was actually a $25 tweet for me. Or that tweet was a $3,000 tweet. Or that promoted trend was worth $110,000 to me. Because we can actually trace that. And so the more and more you can actually build that feedback loop into your advertising buy, I think is where we result in more math driven. And so as you think about what these guys just said about Google Analytics and Omniture, et cetera, there is a constant quest for trying to link what's actually happening on the back end of your service or on the back end of Liftopia, et cetera, to where those folks came from on the front end. And then you can finally make good decisions about where to spend your money. And you can finally kind of stop working on gut and start working off of money.
So as far, and by the way, I'm just firing these out so that there's not awkward silence. So by all means, interrupt me with your own personal questions. But in the meantime, so
we would just talk if there was
awkward silence. If data is king, if the name of the game is, well, one, tracking ROI on any kind of marketing that you're doing, but two, also collect as much data as you can, where is that fine line on the point of booking, whether it's in person or online or whatever the channel is, in terms of the maximum amount of data that we should try and collect before it gets in the way of the actual transaction? Do you guys, is there like a specific point at which we kind of do overkill in terms of trying to collect consumer information?
Which do you like more, money or data?
Money.
Yeah, so normally you take the money first, right?
Yep.
I think the data is helpful on the back end, but there's a tool, I'm going to promote one of my own companies called Optimizely that solves that question for you, because it'll let you, without knowing any code at all, you can change your homepage or any page on your site and drag and drop and change the size of a button, the color of a button, the text on the button. You can take a picture off, move it to the left side, have more lines in your form, fewer lines in your form, and then you can run it and then wait a couple weeks and see which one made you more money and which one converted more and which one got people signed up. We did it for the Clinton Bush Haiti campaign, and it was a big fundraiser in the wake of the Haiti earthquake, and we were trying to figure out what text to put in the button. So if you're raising money for charity for Haiti, what do you put there? Like give now, help. We had all these different variations. The one that outperformed by a 3.5x over everything else said support Haiti. No one in this room would have made that their first choice for a button, including me. Like we would have never thought. It was just on a long list of things we were testing. But it turned out, for whatever friggin' reason, in conjunction with the other elements on the page, support Haiti led to a 3.5x higher conversion rate than the standard page we were using. And so we can guess, we can ask about that stuff, but just try it, run the math. We're lucky in that we all have businesses that are big enough that we get more than one data point. And so we can just try this stuff digitally and see what sticks.
Dustin, I mean, given that you're pure e-commerce and 100% of your bookings or a large portion of your bookings are online, what do you guys try and capture from your users in terms of data?
So yeah, I mean, obviously take the money, and you can have data paralysis or analysis paralysis. It's kind of something the executive team talks about a bunch, because we can just vacillate forever and cut the data 18 different ways, and ultimately you don't have actionable data even though you've looked at it 100 different ways. So just make sure that you know what you're looking for and you know why you're asking that question. We've spent a lot of time built a big data warehouse, and we have OLAC cubes, and basically really try to be all analytical and math PhD at our company. And at the end of the day, what matters is, did they buy and did it happen at a profitable rate? And then, we can go and say, okay, do we retain a good customer, a bad customer? Should we talk to him again and modify the future communications? But we've pretty much built the business on, did that one transaction come in profitably? Cool, do that again. Quit doing that one.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're asking a really good question, because so often I see people start from no data to like 50 or 100, I mean, just a large slew of data, and really, I think you grow your way there, and it's much, I think, starting with just a few real data points that are accurate could really significantly move your business and your business efficiency a long way, and then you get those data points and you collect a few more and you go a little further and a little further. I think one of the mistakes people make is you go guardrail to guardrail and you get swamped and inundated and you freeze and you actually don't make any change right away, and you end up with a 6-month or 12-month or, God forbid, 18-month project, and you haven't changed anything. And I think, I would guess, every single person in this room with a little bit of data in a week or two could actually affect change on your website if you had the right data and the right tools. So I'm a big fan of starting small, building and growing and evolving, and based on the resources and the people that you have on your team.
So when I landed at Butterfield & Robinson about 3 years ago, and I went in as sort of the interim CEO, it's a small tour operator, it was a kick, and George Butterfield's a friend of mine, so I said, yeah, great, I've got a fun little business to really dig into. What they were doing to remove friction in the purchase path is when you went to download an itinerary, all they were getting was your first name, so they could make the email nice. Oh, thanks, Gregg, for your inquiry about the Loire Valley biking trip, right? And if all you have is the first name and the email address that you're sending to, there's this giant assumption, I guess, that that's the same email address that might have been used by that person had they ever bought anything from you. Now, all you actually have to do is just collect the last name too, and now all of a sudden your chances of being able to match the thing are infinitely higher and so on. But it was so interesting. The key learning there is the two streams were controlled by two different people. And so much of getting your data structure right is actually not a PhD in the back room. It's an effectively run marketing meeting where you actually think, what do we need to know for this actually to work properly? Let's actually take the whiteboard and do the communication. What are we trying to do the contact? And then you realize, well, wait a sec. What if they use different email addresses for those two things? We better ask for the last name too. Yeah, it'll slow it down a bit, but let's just do that. It is amazing to me how often that step gets skipped. And there's no reason to skip it. It's not a data step, it's just a being organized about what you're taking in and what you're trying to do with it step.
I really like your point about being focused on what those goals are and kind of the incremental path towards that point. And in addition to kind of analysis paralysis, I think you get to a point where there's so many, as a place gets bigger and bigger, one of the things I've noticed with talking to Liftopia guys is they have the most success in the early days with the smallest mountains that didn't have a massive department or a massive company with individual divisions all struggling over the data. Instead, they had one person who was trying to drive traffic and sales. And so they would sit with these guys and they get this holistic view and be like, okay, the person from the resort would be like, I'm here to actually just drive bottom line, right? Now, as these resorts get bigger, you've got the person who's like, hey, look, all I give a shit about is on-premise housing. And this person's responsible for condos and real estate, and this person's responsible for on-mountain dining. This person's responsible for affiliate sales for corporate events. This person does weather. This person does ski school. This person does snow report. And before you know it, you find all these people competing for real estate on your homepage, competing for different access data points to be compiled. And it can just be literally the sheer politics of it make for horrible staff meetings, bad data, and bad homepages. And so one of the things I like to do with companies in the technology space even is plug our site into a projector and then blow it up so it takes up as much of the wall as possible so that you can't see it all with your eyeball at once. You have to actually crane your neck like sitting too close at the movies, and then make everybody in the room defend every single pixel on that page. And so what you'll find is on most of your resort pages, you'll have 60 to 70 calls to action, 60 to 70 places that somebody could actually click and do something. And users can't stand that shit. They turn and run because they're just like, oh my God, I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing here, et cetera. And yet, if you clearly define simple goals up front, you can strip away all this stuff and say, yes, I do have a constituency that cares about whether the half pipe at Mid-Mountain is open, et cetera. But you know what? That's not one of my primary goals for this site. My primary goals are to deliver X and Y and Z. And no one's equipped better to determine what those goals are than you. A technology company can't tell you those goals. But once you decide what those goals are, very simply, you can craft the tactics around them and strip away all the other stuff that might get in the way.
I think it's really interesting to point out, too, based on your point earlier, that we have these assumptions as to what we think users are going to do. But when you actually go out and start testing it, 9 times out of 10, they're doing the exact opposite of what you assumed would be, if you're doing like a version test, what you would assume the winning version to be. And that's why, yeah, on even like a per-click basis within a homepage, it's so important to be able to track the end-to-end conversion funnel and see, are you giving the right real estate to the right elements on your page?
Yeah, at Expedia, we figured, when we launched hotels back in the dark ages, we thought, well, we got all these people buying plane tickets, and now some percentage of them are going to buy hotels, and that's how that business is going to go. And instead, there was a tiny percentage of kind of crossover, but instead what ended up happening was a completely different stream of people was coming in and buying hotel. And they were 2 separate purchase things, different people. They were just 2 different businesses. You never would have predicted it. And you never would have known what was happening if you weren't paying enough attention to the metrics to see it, right? Otherwise, you would have been, hey, look, we're selling lots of hotels. It must be all those same people. You got to do the work.
So,
I was just wondering from an advertising perspective, display, you talked a little bit about CTV, noticing video on the rise lately. All winter long, I get retargeted by backcountry ads on every site I go to.
I know that the technology is still really dumb, because if you buy something from us, we'll still retarget you the thing you bought, and it's just simply that the technology is not there to tell hey, he bought it, quit showing him that, show him something else, or you to go, hey, stop showing me this, I'm over it.
Yeah, I mean, you can retarget with video ads over there on pre-roll ads, which is interesting for someone who's seen that. I'm just wondering with your businesses or personal experiences in bus, working better than others, display versus expandable versus video or engagement.
Until retargeting came along, we were never able to make a display ad payback. So again, our business was built on that sale that happened had to come in at a profitable amount, and that's pretty efficient. So until we had retargeting and really knew who we were talking to, and basically we're just retargeting people who have been to our site, and then we're showing you stuff that you looked at. That is what worked. But there's new retargeting now where you could go to somebody that went to weather.com, looked up the weather and steamboat, and then go follow him around with a steamboat ad. And we haven't messed with that yet, but it seems like for a ski resort, that'd be pretty awesome.
I mean, the job of a marketer is just getting harder and harder, because what worked for you yesterday or last week or may not work tomorrow or next week or beyond. I mean, for us, we found you got to refresh these things regularly. Test and learn is not just, it used to be you test and learn your way to a sustainable marketing program. Like that was traditional marketing, and then you'd start pour in the money and you'd grow the business. It doesn't work that way anymore. It's perpetual test and learn. So we have found things that work better and up to a point, and then they don't scale anymore, and we have to go on and find new things. And if we're not paying attention to the old things, we'll find that they've stopped working, but we're still spending the money there. So it kind of comes back to having a good infrastructure for understanding what a customer's worth, understanding whether the channel's delivering a customer in a cost-effective way, and then continuing to try new things as they come along.
Both of you guys said something interesting, which is what a customer's worth and what your customer's worth. Like I find a lot of businesses that don't know that don't have the answer to that question. They don't know what someone who walks in the door or someone who actually converts on their website is worth to them. How hard is it to back into that number as doing online commerce?
I mean, our company was started with $2,000 in 1996, and so during the internet heyday, right, people were funded, and FogDog spent $70 million in advertising the first year I worked at Backcountry. So we didn't have a choice, right? We had no money, so we had to know what we could spend, and that was zero or profitable, right? So yeah, it's not hard though. Basic accounting.
One of the advertising media that I'm seeing actually pay back and with crazy engagement is in the crossover between my technology and Hollywood stuff, is that host-driven video content. So when, not sketch comedy, but literally like interview shows driven by a host, advertising brands that are consistent with the voice of that host, where they can literally stop interviewing and turn to the audience and say, hey, this is brought to you by. It's an old format, but the engagement on that stuff is really high. The prices have come up because the actionability on that stuff. There are guys at Revision 3 who are doing $80 CPMs right now for host-driven stuff. So that's happening within the content itself. And then there's amazing data coming out of YouTube and some of the stuff we've been doing with them that on the front end, on the pre-roll, if you actually include the talent from the thing they're about to watch, on the front end of that, engagement goes up about 7x. And so I think one of the things, when we started thinking about the intersection of math and humans, et cetera, is that we use the math to determine that humans actually like the voices that they already trust and the identities. So if you're selling a clip, you can either take YouTube's random Verizon ad that goes before that as a pre-roll, or you can say, hey, look, if this clip is about skiing at Squaw Valley and Johnny Mosley's in it, I should peg Johnny into my pre-roll here, and you'll get much more engagement there. So I don't know. That's a couple lessons learned from the trenches recently.
So we're running a little bit low on time. I have one last question, but before we do that, I was wondering if there's any other last ones from the audience. Or Okay. So more than anything, resorts operate, ski areas, hotels, tour operators, everyone's operating in an incredibly competitive environment. And you guys have all had great success operating in incredibly competitive environments as well, whether it's Hotwire and Expedia, Backcountry, and pretty much every startup ever is, just fighting for its life out there. So are there any lessons that you guys have learned in your experiences that you can share with the audience here that resorts, hotels, et cetera, can use to similarly differentiate via digital marketing tools?
I'm going to go a little bit meta and just say the first thing is to believe in your question. I think resorts are way too quick to commoditize themselves based on what their neighbors do. And I think some things are non-substitute goods, like a pass at Alpine pre-merger. A pass at Alpine and a pass at Squaw were not the same thing. Like, there were purists who liked to ski Alpine because it wasn't Squaw, but Squaw plays at a different level. It's, for whatever, it's mostly because of his mom in the 1960 Olympics. But it's a unique resort, and so it used to drive me crazy to watch them kind of stoop to the lowest common denominator on pass pricing and try and compete with everybody else in the neighborhood and pretend like it's a toss-up whether I go to Homewood today or whether I go to Squaw, right? And so I think, and yet I'm not in business to endorse much of what Vail does, but I think they've established a unique voice for North Star, so that nobody's actually tossing up, am I going to North Star or Squaw today? They're two different voices and two different products, and I think they've done a good job of capturing share as a result. So I think just even believing that in differentiation, believing in identity, believing in a product that you're delivering that's not just, hey, who's the cheapest ticket in business today? Like, instead, combining a dynamic pricing component with a unique identity and an attraction, big, hey, there's an experience there, I think is the way to go now.
So I think, there's basically two ways to approach differentiation, right? I mean, one is if your product is actually different, and you just tell that in a straightforward way, that'll get you a really long way. If the product is perceived as being pretty similar, which I'm going to guess is, online travel, ski is probably not that far off, a lot of the time how you communicate is where you end up with the differentiation. And the reality is that you can really go a long way by communicating a set of benefits, pricing accordingly underneath those things so that the loop makes sense to people, and then pushing it very hard in all the logical communication channels. I mean, I'll just tell the one quick thing is we were searching for a way to differentiate Expedia from Travelocity, Priceline, Orbitz, and so on back in the day. And there's lots of different ways to do that, right? And one of the things we could do is we had a bigger margin on our hotel than the other guys. We knew could bid more on Google. There's some just baseline stuff like that. But part of it is the way you communicate. We must have done 150 takes of different people going .com, Expedia.com, .com. I mean, it drive you crazy. But eventually you find it, and then you just hammer it over and over again, and it makes a difference. In the ski world, it's like the horses at Steamboat. I don't know, right? I mean, it's just a differentiated thing. And so I think you can't lose sight of the fact that, human beings are still emotionally vulnerable animals. And what you really have to do when you're differentiating is give them some sort of reason to believe you. You have to give them that reason. And if you do, and you do it effectively, and you research it carefully, they will believe you. And then you're differentiated. And I couldn't agree with Chris more. The one thing not to do, God, don't just do the same thing as the other guy, right? I mean, that's the one thing you don't do, because you'll never dig out of it if you get a reputation for doing that.
Yeah, this industry reflexively punches itself in the nads over and over again, all the time. It just, without any data, just by sheer like FOMO, like fear of missing out, they just constantly like drop. And so the weather's shitty and the economy's shitty, and we're like, hey, why don't we just keep dropping prices reflexively?
$169 for the price.
And I think, by the way, I want to be, because you brought up the human element, and I think it's really, really important. When I say that marketing is math-driven, I had this saying that I used with my division at Google, which was it takes an artist to hypothesize and a scientist to test. And so I think it still takes the soul of a marketer and the soul of an advertiser and the soul of a creative to start and presage, like to kind of come up with the ideas of what do people care about, and to channel like who actually comes to the mountain. What does a mom and her kids care about? What does the bro-bra who lives in the van down in the parking lot care about? And one of these components. But I think the part that's missing is the testing, is the actual collecting that data, testing those hypotheses. And so I think you need both artists and scientists in your building.
Greg?
Just real quick, I mean, I think marketing increasingly is just there are ways to amplify your core product, so kind of a variation on a theme here. One of the things we haven't touched on is the payoff for that. I mean, if you can change the perception in the market, there have been some studies done by Expedia and others. You can move from a 3-star rating to a 4-star rating. That has real economic value in terms of your ability to charge for your resort, for your property. Numbers that I've seen range from 9% per star category to close to 40%, which is a crazy number that ComScore threw out in a study last year. So the value of focusing on what the product is, making sure that it's being messaged clearly, and then making sure that it's supported with good service and the things that people want in order to give you a good rating can totally pay off in terms of the bottom line.
Cool. And Dustin, I guess we'll end with you.
So yeah, it's all about the math, but it's also all about being authentic, and that's really been Backcountry's specialty. Like, we're kind of a inclusive, exclusive brand, and that's what you guys should treat your resorts as. I mean, I know you want everybody to come, but you really don't want everybody. So figure out who you do want, speak authentically to them, and then measure it.
So I bought a board from Backcountry, and the receipt comes through in my email. Get stoked, your board's on the way. It was so good.
All right. Well, that's how you do it, right?
That's how you do it.
Cool. Well, we're very much over on time. So thank you guys. Thank you all for coming here. Thank you to our great panelists. This is awesome. Thank you guys. Enjoy the rest of the conference.